we really want our students to come out understanding those, all of those things in relation to Hawaii. So we're putting a lot of emphasis on Native Hawaiian place of learning. That is, they should understand the specifics of climate change in relation to Hawaii. They should understand culturally how Native Hawaiian systems might inform our solutions to things like public health crises, as well as scientific things like climate change.
Aloha and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Colin Moore, the chair of the School of Communications and the director of the Public Policy Center here at UH Manoa. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so happy to be here today with our very first panel with an exciting new collaboration between UH and the Hawaii Book and Music Festival. Today, we're going to be talking with some of the University of Hawaii's top leaders about how UH can lead Hawaii forward after COVID and beyond. We'll begin with some short interviews with our special guests, and then we'll take your questions. Today, we'll be talking with UH Manoa Provost Michael Bruno, Jerris Hedges, the Dean of the John A. Burns School of Medicine, Laura Lyons, the Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, and Maenette Benham, the Chancellor of UH West Oahu. So thank you so much for being with us. There'll be a chance for you to ask your questions at the end, and we'll begin with Laura Lyons for about 7 minutes, and then we'll talk to all of our guests and turn to your questions. Laura, thank you for being with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Colin.
You know, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the role the university can play in setting the groundwork for a functional democracy, something that I think, you know, given the election and the challenges the nation has faced during COVID, we all agree is more important than ever.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking, because this is something I feel really quite passionate about. We are spending a lot of time right now talking with the departments and talking throughout the system about workforce development. And we have an obligation to do that given the investment that the state makes in public higher education here, right? But at the same time, we have to be cognizant that the role of a college education is not simply to supply a labor pool or for students to get jobs at the end. Of course, we want them to, but their education has to serve them longer than the job that they get when they graduate, right? And it has to serve them through many different potential career changes, and also changes in the economic and social circumstances of the communities that they're living in, such as the pandemic. So we have to educate people broadly in order to do that. We live in really challenging times, and in terms of democracy, it is more important than ever to have our students educated to the highest levels of literacy, because we are seeing repeatedly now that our elections are being compromised by materials that require ever greater critical thinking skills to parse out what they mean, where they came from, what their affective dimensions are. We need public health officials who understand the ethical dimensions of the decisions they make for the broader community, right? We need, you know, students who can understand basic science when they graduate. Whether they're an English or a music major, they need to understand basic science, because we're seeing that we are being challenged on issues of climate change by people with very anti-humanist, anti-science minded attitudes, and that we cannot as a democracy solve our problems when we don't have highly educated citizens, and that the level of education is getting higher, not lesser. And that even as the jobs that students occupy become more technically oriented, that broad education is nonetheless really crucial. I would add to that, and especially this is something important to us at Manoa, as I know it is at West Oahu, we really want our students to come out understanding those, all of those things in relation to Hawaii. So we're putting a lot of emphasis on Native Hawaiian place of learning. That is, they should understand the specifics of climate change in relation to Hawaii. They should understand culturally how Native Hawaiian systems might inform our solutions to things like public health crises, as well as scientific things like climate change. I'm also thinking that we need a broad set of majors, right? So languages are becoming more and more crucial. As we have faced this pandemic, we've seen that it hit our Pacific Island communities harder. And it really wasn't until materials were developed specifically targeting those Pacific Island communities that we saw the rates begin to drop, right? Translation is so crucial. You know, one of the first things that was necessary was for the medical information coming out of China to be translated and disseminated worldwide by the World Health Organization. It's also the case, right, that our medical translators, they're really first responders, and this is something I would like to have seen talked about much more. They're often standing at the bedside with the doctors in order to get that information, and they're an important conduit to the families outside of the hospitals, right? So the ability to know language and culture in a really strong way in order to create those communication lines is so crucial at this moment. And you know, so those are some of the things I would say are crucial for democracy.
I wonder if I could follow up for a second with this question about jobs and workforce, because during the pandemic, many of us have turned to works of art and film and history and literature to get us through this. But I mean, as you are well aware, questions have persisted for decades about whether humanities majors have decent job prospects. What would you say to students or parents who fear that someone who chooses a humanities or art major might be somehow harmed or have a tough time finding employment as a result?
Well, there was a meme that was going around the internet back in the spring that said, if you think artists and writers are useless, try to spend your quarantine without music, poems, books, movies, paintings, and games, right? So, you know, all of those things also have an economy. They're just not the things that come to mind. The gaming industry is actually the biggest segment of the entertainment industry. So, and a growing segment, there are definitely jobs to be had within the humanities and the arts. But what I want to say, even as much as I love that meme, and I kind of thought maybe I should have my mother-in-law cross-stitch it on a pillow for me or something, it does kind of make the arts a pastime, right? It'd be hard for us to get through quarantine without those things. But the arts do much more. They expand and make us exercise our creative and imaginative capacities. And creativity is a skill that we are going to need going forward more than ever, right? And, you know, all fields involve creativity. So it's not like the arts have a lock on it. But in fact, we actually should have engineers taking art classes or music classes because it overall expands the capacity to think, what if? You know, to think differently, to make a set of connections that they wouldn't if their education was more narrowly focused just on the technical aspects of, you know, engineering or, you know, microbiology or whatever, and vice versa. I think it's actually quite important for those in the humanities and the arts to have a background and some background in business, some background, definitely background in science. There, you know, visual art is largely about chemical reactions in different media, right? So you should know the science behind those things, as well as you should know science more broadly for the effect that it has on the kinds of problems that we face. So in general, what we need are students to be highly educated, to be able to exercise ethical and creative capacities to think not just about the problems that we're facing right now, but the ones that we can't even see coming. You know, we were not thinking that we were going to be meeting this way this time last year, right? So we never know the challenges that we're going to face. And so we have to educate as broadly as possible in order to face those challenges.
Thanks so much, Laura. And actually, with what you just said about science, I think we can turn to Jerris Hedges, the dean of the John A. Burns School of Medicine, to learn a little bit about how the medical school has been reacting to the crisis and what they've been providing to the community. So thanks for joining us, Jerris. And I'll just get right into it and ask you if you could just set us up by describing a little bit the research, the training, and the medical assistance undertaken by the medical school during the pandemic.
Thanks, Colin. It's actually a very long list. I've tried to condense it into some things that would be most impactful. I want to thank everyone who's on this segment of the Hawaii Book and Music Festival for being a part of this. We've been seeking, how can we both accomplish those academic goals while also helping the university and our community look towards greater health and resilience in its economy. And those are tough goals, and there are no easy solutions, but I'll share a few things. And I want to give a shout out to my colleagues across the health sciences at Manoa, Mary Bowen in particular, the Dean of the School of Nursing, but also colleagues from public health and from our University Health Services program. Andy has been a real contributor, social work, just everyone has pulled together to begin to look at what do we need to do to address the myriad of evolving federal guidelines and best practices across the nation and get those aligned with what our state leadership and hospital leadership, where we have our clinical learning environment, and also our legislators, what they're seeking. So aligning recommendations and guidelines for practice, whether it be delivery of education in a classroom, by what we can do interfacing with students by teleconferencing, but also how do we put our trainees in the health sciences out into the community, working with patients and with practitioners where they themselves have some risk of exposure. So we've been helping evolve campus guidelines and addressing those with national best practices as part of a health and well-being working team. Also, we've had from those same groups a large number of people who've been part of the core for the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, or HIEMA. Most are familiar with General Hara. Many are not aware that Steve Hankins, one of our faculty from family medicine, has headed up a special support function group on public health and medical services. This is one that has linked the practitioners in the community with the health systems, coordinated care, and make sure there's continuity of care throughout the community. But a lot of people have helped both with forecasting rates of COVID and risk of compromise of our health system, been doing modeling for the health systems, as well as been looking at social services in the community. So tremendous range of efforts done by faculty across multiple health science disciplines here. We're also working closely with the health systems themselves to develop guidelines for learners in their environment. They sometimes need the learners to help with care delivery, but they also have to be cognizant of what the risk in the learning environment is. So we've worked very closely in a very evolving manner to come up with working conditions. And when you look at medical schools across the US, we actually have more trainees with direct patient contact than the majority of medical schools elsewhere in the nation, in part because of the policies and practices put together with our colleagues in the health systems. We've also been participating collectively with health sciences, addressing public health policy issues. Some of us have provided input at the national level for guidelines around vaccine distribution when that becomes available in the coming year. We've also had a working group that worked with the Blood Bank of Hawaii and the local health systems around the use of convalescent plasma treatment. We've been working on telehealth expansion and its implementation more broadly, and how to get providers and health systems reimbursed for care delivered in that manner, and making sure that we have strategies for testing and contact tracing in this community. Areas of significant need that you've read a lot about in the media. And with the help of a number of people, both nursing, public health, our community colleges, UH West Oahu, we have expanded training for contact tracers and have put strategies in place working with the Department of Health. And I think we're going to see, as leadership evolves with the Department of Health, more and more of our trained personnel assisting there. And you may have heard about a testing facility the city and county of Honolulu have supported, and it's been a long road getting that ready. We're having our blessing today. They've done all the internal checks. They've gotten systems in place to transfer data to the Department of Health, but it's been a long time coming, and we'll be working with community health centers and first responders for the city county to monitor them for their COVID status, and hopefully that can be expanded to reach other parts of the community that don't have as ready access for testing. The research programs are often unsung heroes. Research programs have been bringing federal dollars in through extramural grants. We received a recent supplement to work with our health centers across Hawaii, and it's been very exciting because this will focus on some of the most needy and most vulnerable groups, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders, and Filipino populations that have greater risks for morbidity and mortality from the coronavirus. We've been working with local biotech, with Oceanette, in terms of some large-scale rapid testing technologies, and also we've been working on the vaccine with Soligenex, looking at a novel formulation that'll be heat resistant and allow vaccines to be delivered to parts of the world that might not otherwise receive the vaccine. So, it's easy to forget as we do this that we're also training the next generation of providers, and many of our faculty, as well as trainees, are delivering care in the community during this epidemic. So it's been very important to keep the health systems going with these efforts. I'd like to just say a little bit in terms of how we can help with the future. I think when we break it down into the economy and the delivery of services, research, bringing federal and foundation dollars, not only to do fundamental research related to coronavirus, but they'll also help us with care innovations, technology development, and implementation is vital. We also are working, of course, with the health system so they can deliver more efficient care and deliver more care. And I think we've formed a good team to look at innovations and deliver best practices in really rapid speed across the health systems here in Hawaii. And that'll help us in terms of the economic costs of delivering care in this very difficult time. And of course, I mentioned previously the telehealth piece, which allows us to deliver care in areas that we couldn't have and keep them functional and healthy in different parts of the state. But again, I can't say enough about our faculty and trainees in terms of how they stepped up and contributed to healthcare here. And I think some of these innovations that are coming forward are going to be very, very helpful for us. But let me stop there and see if you have a follow-up question or if it's time for the next speaker.
Well, that was a very comprehensive and exciting answer. So I think we'll wait for the end. I'm sure people have questions about some of what you said. But for now, I think we'll move on to Maenette Benham, the Chancellor of UH West Oahu, who we're really thrilled to have with us today. And I wanted to focus our conversation, if I could, on community partnerships, because UH West Oahu has been so involved in the community and focused on the community. What partnerships are working, and what partnerships does UH West Oahu have planned, and how is this important to help us recover from COVID?
Well, I'm so happy that you're asking that question about what we call here at UH West Oahu the scholarship of engagement, that really pivots our efforts here to look at what our expertise on our campus, and has us looking into our community in ways that we can truly engage with community members to make a significant difference, to create social justice in the many communities that we serve. I also want to acknowledge my colleagues that are on this panel as well, and mahalo to Laura and to Jerris for the wonderful work that they're doing and sharing with us today. And it reminds me that, you know, we're all dedicated not only to the academic excellence of each one of our campuses within the system, but we're dedicated to do this by serving with aloha for our local, our national, and our international communities that we are responsible for. So as the one public institution of higher education, you know, we have this historic trust that's embedded in the concepts of kuleana, ohana, and aina that serve to remind us of our responsibilities to our family, community, and the environment. And I know that at UH West Oahu, that is a hallmark of our culture of community engagement, of scholarship, of engagement that extends far beyond our classroom, is what the faculty are doing in our K-12 school systems through early college, through creating articulations, planning and developing pathways for our students from K through 12 to really see higher education as an opportunity, as an accessible opportunity, as an affordable opportunity to bring to their family and their communities the kinds of abundance that's so available through higher education and in this place. One of our partnerships that has profited quite a bit is our relationship with the Kapolei Chamber of Commerce and the Kamehameha Schools and the Department of Education. Recently, our efforts to link all of our regional businesses to high school students, to academic programs at UH West Oahu, to careers has actually gone viral. And it's being picked up by our P20 program, and it's going to be replicated around the state. Again, bringing together high school students with higher education, with businesses, so that our students are staying here and not going away, and the brain drain is now turned around, and students are finding a way to contribute to the economic health and well-being of their communities. Just like Laura and Michael, I'm sure he'll mention this as well, that central to our kuleana in our communities is really, central to that is our faculty. And our faculty's complete dedication and commitment to engage, and as Laura brought up, real ethical learning environments where students have a free exchange of ideas, where they can share in a variety of intellectual resources across the disciplines with cutting edge scholarships and scholarship that our faculty, not only at West Oahu, is doing, but across our system.
Thanks. I wanted to ask one follow-up, which maybe some people on this call may not know about the university's commitment to be a Hawaiian place of learning. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and talk about where we're succeeding and where the university could do more to achieve that goal.
So the University of Hawaii has a commitment to the indigenous people of this place. Hence the Hawaiian place of learning. And I had mentioned earlier 3 values, kuleana, ohana, and aina. Because when we talk about Hawaiian place of learning, it is a much deeper conversation, much more complicated explanation than I can provide in the short period of time that I have. But I guess I could say that so quickly, sort of an ancestral, very short story of our Hawaiian mo'okuauhau, our genealogy. So Hawaiians believe that our elder sibling is this place, right? And we are all here as visitors, as people of this place. And we have a deep, deep kuleana responsibility to take care of this place, Kanaka as well as non-Hawaiians. Because this place is our kaikua'ana, is our elder sibling. It is the elder sibling not only to Hawaiian people, but it is the elder sibling of everyone who is here right now. And we are the younger sibling, the kaikaina. We are here not only to partake of the abundance of this place, but we are also here to ensure that there's good palina and relationship. So when we talk about the university's responsibility to be a Native Hawaiian place of learning, it really is having us think deeply about our kuleana to making sure that this place that we live in is healthy, is abundant, into perpetuity, not only for Kanaka, but for all of the others who called this place home. Are we doing a really good job? I think we're getting there.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chancellor Benham. I'll turn now to our last speaker, Provost Michael Bruno of UH Manoa. And this is, you are one of the top administrators, so you look at the big picture. So I want to ask you a big picture question, which is, how are you and President Lasner looking to position UH for the future and to help Hawaii recover from the COVID pandemic?
Let me first begin by saying how proud and honored we are to be a part of a major part of the Hawaii Book and Music Festival, and I hope that this partnership continues. I also want to thank my colleagues who have already spoken. Your words are both beautiful and inspiring. Thank you so much. And lastly, and several have already mentioned this, but thanks to our faculty, our staff, and our students. We are at the end of our 6th week of instruction. We are keeping our employees and our students safe, and our young learners continue to learn, and we are continuing to keep them safe. So I'm very, very grateful for that. With respect to your question, it is our responsibility to lead. Chancellor Benham just very eloquently described our kuleana to this place. We can never lose sight of where we are and who we are. We have a unique responsibility. So when I tell my colleagues on the continent that we are at once a premier R1 research university that is also very student-centric and the most community-facing organization that I have ever worked for. And I mean all of those things, and they can be co-located, they can live together in a very powerful, effective way. And in that sense, I think this university system can be an exemplar and an example to really other universities around the world. If you'll allow me, I want to read the draft vision statement in our draft strategic plan. And we say, this is UH Manoa, we will be locally and globally recognized as a premier, student-centered, Carnegie Research One, community-serving university, grounded in a Native Hawaiian place of learning that summons our rich knowledge systems to help Malama Hawaii and the world for future generations. And I love that vision statement. It's part of who we are. It addresses where we are and who we are. If this state is to move forward, I really strongly believe it will be led by the University of Hawaii. I look at a university as obviously a center of learning. We develop new knowledge and new understanding, but we disseminate that new knowledge and understanding. We use it to inspire and inform our students. We also move it out. If we are going to be doing our jobs well, we move it out for the public good. And I don't know of another university that does that in such a strong way. So I've been spending a lot of time thinking about our capacity to develop those new knowledge, the new understanding, and our capacity to move it quickly out to good use. And when you think about the pandemic and the ways in which so many segments of our university have jumped in, much of it on a voluntary basis. Jerris spoke eloquently about the health the healthcare aspects and the medicine. But engineering pitched in by designing and actually printing masks of face shields. We had several departments, CTAR, theater and dance, creating masks for distribution. We had UHERO and some of your colleagues in public policy being right there with the legislature and the governor, informing our elected officials and helping to guide them. And I couldn't be more proud. But we also have to remember, when a hurricane is coming towards our islands, who's out there? It's our faculty that are working alongside the federal government in producing very, very accurate forecasts. When a volcano erupts, it's our faculty on the sides of those volcanoes reporting back their data and their information, a lot of it on cell phones, to our senators and our governor. And it's really inspiring for me to see how community facing we are, and for us to come through this pandemic, for us to remake Hawaii as a more sustainable place with sustainable tourism, sustainable agriculture, sustainable water use, and all the other aspects of the economy that we talk about with high tech and other aspects, the arts, which are so important, as has been mentioned. I think that we are well positioned, and as you know, Colin, we just met. We are working closely with our departments and our units to even more strongly position ourselves to have those beneficial impacts. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I know that there were some questions before I even showed up to moderate this panel from people who were wondering how UH is preparing to potentially bring students back, if there are other institutions, other places that we can use as a model for reopening to get students back in the classroom. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about how you're thinking about that and how you're thinking about keeping the educational opportunities here accessible to students during the pandemic.
Yeah, number one is safety. And I'm really proud of the work that our team has done, our Vice Chancellor for Students and her team, and our enrollment management team, and our hats off in particular to our residence life, our student residents, folks who have kept our students safe. We worked very closely with the Governor and Attorney General to develop a plan to bring our students, those of whom who live on the mainland and overseas, to come in, to be tested or show proof of a test, to basically live in a bubble for 14 days after arrival, where they were only engaged in campus activities. Right now, we are planning to do exactly the same in the spring semester. Unless conditions warrant otherwise, we are going to be very careful with that. We will soon spin up campus testing. Dean Hedges mentioned the lab coming online. The plan is to engage with that testing to go out into underserved portions of our population, and then to make plans to provide those testing capabilities here on campus. So we do know that testing has to be part of keeping our campus safe. So is physical distancing. 86% of our courses this semester are 100% online. So only 14% are in any part face-to-face. So we think, and that was driven by faculty. We gave faculty the option, encouraging them to think about the most effective modalities. And I think we've arrived at a very effective mix that's keeping our students and our faculty safe.
Colin, if I could just add that across the University of Hawaii system, what I have learned over the last 7 months is that there are 3 key things that have helped campus chancellors and Provost Bruno really try to make decisions about moving forward. And the first, of course, as Provost Bruno has mentioned, is the safety, health, and well-being of our students and the communities that surround us. We are definitely impacted by everything that's happening around us. We're not in a bubble. So safety is very important. And in order for us to really move forward safely, our networks, working together as a system under the leadership of President Lasner, with our vice presidents, that network of leadership that makes up the executive officers of this system has worked so very hard to voraciously study what's going on at other campuses across the globe, what's going on in the 48 states, contiguous states on the continent, in order to make the kinds of policy decisions that we need to move forward. So safety, networking, and really making decisions and being leaders, I believe, in this state to actually take steps to take a stance for the work that we're doing and for the people that we're serving. I mean, you know, I know there's a question on the question board about, you know, how are we going to survive with the cuts that are coming down? And people need to know that it's extremely painful. You know, I work a lot with the community colleges and the faculty and the students. And you know, it's going to be painful, but there is such aloha, there is such community commitment to the opportunity that this university can share with everyone in the state of Hawaii. But that network and that good pilina, that good relationship, I think is important to our survival through this painful period of time.
Thank you, Chancellor Benham. Thank you, Provost Bruno. And with that, I think we'll turn over to the questions. And as Chancellor Benham just mentioned, we have one about the budget cuts, which we're going to have to navigate somehow. And I wonder if maybe everyone could just talk for a second about how in your position at the university, you're trying to think through those. I know there's a lot of anxiety and questions, not just from the students and faculty, but also from the community about what will be cut. As someone wrote in, all of what we've laid out in terms of our vision sounds great, but how can we provide that vision in a time of what may end up being a time of fiscal austerity? Maybe we can start with you, Laura, or Dean Hedges.
Thank you, Colin. Well, I guess I would start by saying one of the things that we really have to do is to collaborate much more widely. And as you know, because you were in a meeting just this morning with Provost Bruno and me and others, right, that really getting faculty to think outside of their particular department or program or the larger unit they're in, and where they can make connections across other units, departments, and programs, I think is really crucial, because we won't be able to hire as many people as we have the last 5 years. And so we're going to have to operate in somewhat more constrained, even greatly more constrained situations. And that means, you know, really making use of and finding synergy across the programs rather than thinking that we can just keep doing things the way we have. I guess the other thing I would say is when I, you know, have friends who talk to me about, well, you know, why are you thinking about this for my program? It's just such little money, right? And if you cut something else, it would be so much more impactful. The truth is, it's going to take a lot of different kinds of tightening of the belt and cutting to get where we need to be. It isn't an either or situation. And we're going to have to figure out how to pull ourselves together to deliver both the research and the educational mission that, you know, is crucial for the state and again, for the young people in this state as well.
Thanks. Dean Hedges?
Yeah, good points by Laura. I think as a whole here in Hawaii, we're very not only comfortable with, but fairly aggressively collaborating compared to other parts of academia across the U.S. And we certainly are looking for ways in the health sciences not only to collaborate across units, but also across institutions and doing more multi-institutional programmatic activity, both for education as well as for research productivity. And we've been looking at how we can bring more revenue in the state. The state needs activity that will generate funds from out of state and create jobs. And so we've been trying to keep our research strong. Our investigators have been working overtime along with staff, getting grant applications out the door, both those based here in Hawaii with collaboration and those based across the US. We're also collaborating more with our health systems, something that we'd always done to a great extent, but we're looking for new ways that we can partner and work together around the learning environment that we need outside of the university in order for us to train health care professionals. And I think we're making some progress there that can be mutually beneficial and also help us on some revenue generation as well. So those are things we're focusing on, and I know that the provost has a tough job, and you'll be talking to Michael next, but I just think that it's really important that we look at what are the programs that the state is going to need that'll create jobs and see how we can preserve them and keep things going. There's so much to be done over the coming years.
Thank you. I'll turn to Provost Bruno next, and I want to add a part of this question that we got in the chat, which is also, are we doing all we can to train federal workers? We know this is a big part of Hawaii's workforce and our economy, and the viewer writes in specifically about shipyard workers and intelligence officers, but I think generally positions that are often very well paid, these federal government positions. Is this a consideration? So I'll add that to this larger question about budget cuts.
Yeah, those are a couple good questions. Thank you, Colin. So yeah, to me, it cannot only be about cuts. In essence, what we're trying to do is become more agile, more responsive to opportunities. As Laura said, and others have said, Jerris just said that collaboration has to be a real key to that. I keep coming back in my mind as I'm having these fantastic conversations with faculty now. We were very provocative in a set of suggestions to 15 different colleges and schools. The ensuing discussions and feedback have opened up other possibilities that have been really inspiring, and they often involve collaborations outside of the unit. And more I'm thinking, a modern university perhaps ought to be organized around problems and common issues rather than stovepiped departments that work on their own, perhaps with very little collaboration. I think when you start imagining that, Jerris and I have spoken about this a lot, about health sciences. You can think of natural sciences, sustainability, Oceania, and other large areas of study that exist across campus. So how do we bring that together? And if we do that, in my opinion, our research, which just, by the way, was essentially record-breaking last year, and our enrollment will both rise. And so what we are doing right now in these conversations is planning, yes, for increased efficiencies, but also increased revenue of all types.
Thank you. I'll direct the next question to Chancellor Benham, and I think it's a good one. And so one viewer writes, how can we measure progress toward making UH a Hawaiian place of learning? How do we make sure we're moving from rhetoric to real action in this area?
So I do want to answer that question, but I would like to answer that question with my colleagues, Colin, because it always, one of the ways to move Hawaiian place of learning is that the Hawaiian person isn't the only one who answers the Hawaiian question, right? What needs to happen is that every person who holds a position in the University of Hawaii system needs to be able to answer that question. It needs to be a core to what they do. So before I answer, I'd like to open it up to any of my colleagues and have them say how they feel they can measure to ensure that, because the three of you are at Manoa, to know that Manoa is moving out of the rhetoric to actually the practice.
So I will answer as best I can right now, Maenette. And you are so very right. So I think that first of all, the student enrollment should reflect the population. I think that the university, particularly Manoa, is doing a much, much better job, and our numbers are strong. Maybe they can get stronger, but they're strong. That is not the case in the terms of our faculty. Like our faculty percentages, our faculty numbers should be more reflective of the Native Hawaiian population, as well as, frankly, other underrepresented groups. And I'll end with our administrators should also, and I feel strongly that way. So there should be a much stronger push to recruit, and this begins, we all know, this begins in high school, if not before. Create a pipeline that will produce eventually Native Hawaiian faculty and Pacific Islander faculty, and then mentor those who come in our doors to rise up the ranks of administration. So I'll end there.
So I know I won't put Laura and Jerris on the spot, although I know they've got an answer for this. But the reason why I did that is because, as some people know, that I was at Manoa before I came out here to West Oahu. And while I was there, we did come up with a Native Hawaiian strategic plan. And we came up with a process called Kaho'oko Kuleana, that is to move towards the responsibility of Manoa as the research institution, as part of the system, to really take a firm stance and move forward. And I would agree entirely with Michael about the different areas that still need to improve upon becoming or learning to become a Native Hawaiian place of learning. I will say that many of the community colleges are a little further ahead, and out here in West Oahu, by virtue of having a Native Hawaiian chancellor that is grounded in Native Hawaiian values and principles, that, you know, we are a little bit ahead of the curve as well. But I think Michael is absolutely right, and I applaud and give kudos to the three people on this Zoom call who have done a tremendous job to kaho'oko kuleana, to know your responsibility and constantly move the dial.
If I could just speak to those excellent comments by Chancellor Benham and also Provost Bruno. One of the things we found in the medical schools, we do a lot of activities, everything from recruitment to curriculum development, and each department has specific areas of responsibility there. But we've begun to have more and more advisory bodies engaged in our processes, including our admissions processes and recruitment. And in those advisory bodies, we want a representation of the community at large, but in particular, we feel, being a Hawaiian place of learning, we need strong representation from Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders in general. So that is one of the commitments we've made as a school and part of UH Manoa. And I think it is clearly impactful in how it has framed not only how we're perceived by the community, but by how our students perceive their education as well.
I can just add one thing, which is I think it's clear from everything that's been said, there is no one measure, right? There are a multitude of measures, and certainly the people whether it's students or faculty who inhabit a university, that's the greatest force for transformation. So when those people change, the institution changes. And I think one of the things that's most important is that, and I'm very proud of Manoa and the way that it's gone, that, although we have Hawaii Nui Akea, Native Hawaiian values are suffused throughout a number of departments, and they're not cordoned off, right? And so part of the health of that idea and the degree to which we're living up to, our promise to attain that depends upon how suffused throughout the entire institution we are in terms of enrollments, faculty, and how those ideas and cultural concepts infuse the curriculum and the research.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're getting still a number of questions about the budget, and I know this doesn't fall directly under your areas of supervision, but I want to ask it in case you can provide any information to our viewers. And one of them is they write that they've seen a lot about little cuts, small programmatic changes, and they wonder if there are any big cuts planned. And they're specifically curious about the future of athletics at UH Manoa, which is a big part of any large public university. So maybe Provost Bruno, you could answer that question.
Yeah, so I'll start from big and come back down to campus level. I've been in many meetings with Chancellor Benham and officers of the other campuses, having some pretty provocative and impactful conversations about system-wide changes that would produce savings. So those conversations are going on. Here at Manoa, we have a separate group that is looking at administrative reorganization that will reduce administrative costs. We've already identified a number of EM positions that will be eliminated. And with respect to athletics, the president appointed and I am co-chair of a so-called Blue Ribbon Committee that is a town gown committee looking at the future of UH athletics. And so the hard conversations are not only occurring in the academic sphere, they are also occurring across all of the different other, not only campuses, but all of the different other aspects of our organization.
Thank you. We have a little less than 10 minutes left, and so I want to begin by wrapping us up and ask each of you if you could just talk for a minute about your hope for the University of Hawaii, maybe over the next 5 years. How would you like to see us emerge as a stronger institution 5 years from now? And whoever would like to go first, you're very welcome to.
Colin, I'll go ahead and jump in. And before getting out to 5 years, we've got to get through the next couple of rough years. And I've told people from the beginning of this that this was not going to be something to be gone in several months, nor necessarily in a year. Even if we have a vaccine that's effective, it'll take time to distribute it, get enough herd immunity, and to address the fact that people's immunity is transient. You may have a number of months of protection from a reinfection, but this issue will be with us for a while, and we're going to have to keep working at it. The good news is if we kind of look at what's happened within the healthcare system and then what is about to happen within the educational system is, number one, we've gotten very good at distance activity to minimize the amount of encounters we have to do, and I expect some of that will continue. And as we plan for the future of our UH system, there'll be a lot of thought about how we blend on-site versus distance learning. There's certain distance things that make sense, and there's certain things where you've got to have hands-on and small group instruction to exchange the knowledge that's necessary. But I think, we've been doing that in the healthcare environment and actually have been very successful in keeping numbers of exposures and number of actual infections down. There's still some risk involved, but it is something that is manageable. So I think that some of those same lessons can be transferred into, into the higher education sector. I think we also have to realize that a lot of the real risk happens not at school and not in the healthcare environment, but actually happens in our communities and at home. And we found that certain activities where we bring large groups of people together who may not live in the same bubble, that they create risk for each other. And we have to begin to educate people about that. But if we do that and adopt some reasonably appropriate protective mechanisms of minimizing exposure, I think we're going to succeed. But I'd like to see the university really help lead the state in terms of its building an economy. And that's what I'd like to see from this university. And as we heard today, it's not an economy that's solely based on technology. It's not solely based on delivering healthcare or specific services. It also involves the creativity and stimulation that we need as human beings. And it needs to be connected with the community. And this community is under stress now. We've had a lot of things to create division, a lot of things that have created tremendous stress, and we've got to start healing the community. And so the university has a big role it can play in that. So
thank you.
I guess I can add to that, and the higher leaders can have the last word. I guess I would say what I want to see in 5 years is, and I think we always have to think longer than 5 years, but in 5 years, I want to see more of the students in this state, in these islands, choose the University of Hawaii. Not because they don't have other options, but because they feel it's the best option for both them and what they want to pursue, and also their community. Because I think too often we've given students in this state and in these islands a sense that to succeed, they have to go away. And that hasn't helped us at all. And so that's what I want to see, is that we have our students staying here in order to serve the communities that they come from, and also the communities that they choose to be a part of. So that's what I'd like to see.
I'll go really fast, Michael. So I just want to go back to the 3 principles that I had mentioned earlier in terms of kuleana, ohana, and aina as being key principles by which we make decisions moving forward. And finally, my takeaway is that we are strong as a system, not as individual campuses. That our efforts are transformative because we are networking with our community partners, and that we are courageous, I believe. Everyone is courageous as leaders and as educators. So those are the things I would want our community to know about us.
I would like to see us prove to ourselves that we can change. I would like our community to begin to get more and more comfortable with change. And in doing that, by doing that, I would like for us to earn the respect and admiration of the community that we serve. I would like us to be even more highly valued out in the community. And with that, with success in that, with earning that trust and respect, I believe what will come along with that is the support that we will continue to need from our legislature, our governor, the public, philanthropists out in the community. We need to earn their trust and their respect, and I think we can do that. Working together, I think we can do that.
Thank you all so much for participating in what I think was a really productive conversation this afternoon. And I want to thank our partners at the Hawaii Book and Music Festival for putting this on. And a huge thanks to UH's IT department for managing today's broadcast, which was terrific. These tech problems sometimes arise, and they were there to solve them for us. And thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon. I hope you learned as much as I did. Aloha.